I was rinsing berry stains from my fingers at the kitchen sink when my father said, across a backyard full of folding chairs and paper cups, "You are a guest here now, Dana. Don't act like more than that." I dried my hands on a dish towel and set it down beside the counter. I did not answer him. I only noticed that the catering manager, the one in the gray jacket with my last invoice on his clipboard, looked from him to me and paused. That mattered later, after I was standing in the front hallway with my bag on my shoulder and my phone open to an account screen. At the time, all I said was, "All right." That was Easter at my father's house in Overland Park, Kansas. By then, arriving early had become a habit I no longer questioned. I got there a little after 7, before the neighborhood had fully settled into morning. The grass in the backyard was still damp from rain overnight, and the flagstone path held that dark, wet color stone gets before the sun dries it out. I let myself in through the side gate, set my tote on one of the patio chairs, and started pulling things into place. There were folding tables stacked against the fence, plastic bins filled with decorations, a cardboard box of pastel eggs with one corner gone soft from being stored too long in the shed, 2 extension cords, a roll of paper table covers, one cooler that smelled faintly like melted ice and old lemonade when I opened it. I worked quietly. That part always came easily to me. By 8, I had tables set up in 2 rows under the string lights my father liked to leave up year-round. By 8:30, I had the egg hunt mapped out in my head and halfway laid in the yard. Small clusters near the oak tree for the younger kids, harder spots near the hydrangeas for the older ones. I checked the catering confirmation on my phone, then the payment receipt, then the delivery window. Everything was in order. Inside, the kitchen smelled like coffee, cinnamon bread, and the lemon spray my stepmother used on the counters. She moved through the room in slippers and a pressed robe, opening cabinets, closing them, giving small instructions without ever quite looking at me directly. "Desserts can stay in the pantry for now," she said. I nodded. "The good serving spoons are in the drawer by the stove." I nodded again. She liked things done well. She also liked behaving as though good work appeared on its own. After my father remarried, the house changed in ways that were hard to point to at first. Nothing dramatic, just a steady narrowing. My old bedroom became a guest room. Holiday plans started being discussed after they had already been decided. I was still welcome, technically. I just wasn't included in the part where belonging is assumed. But I kept showing up, partly because my nieces and nephews expected the same egg hunt every year. Partly because once you become the person who remembers the details, families let you keep doing it until you forget to ask why. By late morning, the driveway started filling. My older brother, Kent, came through the gate with his 2 boys carrying plastic baskets and too much energy for the hour. He gave me a quick half hug, glanced around the yard, and said, "You already got everything handled." "I'm close," I said. Aunt Rachel arrived with a foiled tray of deviled eggs and asked me where she should put them. One of my cousins wanted to know when food would be served. Another asked whether the kids were hunting before lunch or after. It happened the way it always did. No one announced that I was in charge. They just turned toward me as if I were. My father spent most of that time near the grill, talking to 2 men from down the street with coffee cups in hand, like he had stepped into the day at exactly the point where things were already finished. My stepmother drifted between the kitchen and the patio, straightening napkins, smoothing the edge of a tablecloth, nodding once when she saw the dessert table was set. Around noon, one of my nieces ran past me with damp shoes and a ribbon slipping from her hair. Somewhere behind her, a screen door slapped shut. Someone laughed near the fence. Wind moved through the trees just enough to stir the plastic grass in the baskets lined up by the back steps. It looked, from a distance, like a nice family day. And for a while, I let it stay that way. Then I heard my father's voice change. Not louder, exactly, just sharpened in that public way some people use when they want everyone around them to understand a line has been drawn. I turned toward the table. Then I waited. I stayed where I was for a second, near the back steps with a stack of paper plates still warm from the sun. My father was standing at the head of one of the long tables, one hand resting on the back of a chair, the other still holding his coffee cup. He had not raised his voice much. He did not need to. The people closest to him had already gone quiet, and that quiet moved outward faster than sound. "You're a guest here now, Dana," he said, "so don't keep taking over the day." The sentence landed in a way that made the whole yard seem to flatten for a moment. My stepmother sat beside him, hands folded neatly in her lap, and gave one small nod as if he had simply said something overdue. My brother looked down at his plate. My aunt reached for her napkin, then stopped halfway. A child laughed near the fence, not understanding anything, and somehow that made it feel even quieter. I set the paper plates down on the corner of the table. There are moments when embarrassment arrives hot and fast. This was not one of them. What I felt was colder than that. Clearer. Like opening a window in winter and realizing the temperature inside had been wrong for a long time. I did not argue with him. I did not remind anyone that I had been there since morning. I did not mention the payment confirmations in my bag, or the catering invoice in my email, or the grocery receipt folded into my wallet. None of that felt useful yet. I only said, "I understand." Then I turned and walked back toward the house. A few people must have assumed I was checking on something in the kitchen. Someone near the patio asked if lunch service was about to start. One of the boys ran past me with a plastic egg already cracked open in his hand, candy wrappers sticking out of his pocket. I kept walking. Inside, the kitchen was warmer than the yard. Steam had started collecting under the foil lids on the catering trays. The staff had finished setting the buffet table along the far counter. Metal tongs were lined up in order. Chafing racks were lit. One of the servers was unfolding cloth napkins near the island. The smell had changed too. Ham glaze, butter, roasted potatoes, something with rosemary. The catering manager looked up when I came in. He was a practical man in his 40s, the kind who seemed to organize his sentences before speaking them. "We're about 10 minutes out," he said. "Do you want us to open everything now or wait until people come in?" I put my hand on the strap of my bag and looked at the trays. That was the first moment the shape of the afternoon changed in my mind. Not into revenge, not into anything dramatic, just into order. Because the facts were simple. My name was on the contract. My card had been charged in 2 installments. One deposit 3 weeks earlier and the balance that morning. My phone still had the account portal open. The catering company did not work from family politics. It worked from authorization. I set my bag on the counter and opened it. The manager watched quietly while I pulled out my phone, the printed copy of the invoice, and the folder where I kept the paper backup for larger holiday expenses. I had started doing that 2 years earlier after a forced mix-up at Thanksgiving. Since then, I kept everything: dates, names, balances, confirmation numbers. Not because I expected conflict, just because details have a way of maturing later. He glanced at the invoice and then back at me. "Is there a problem?" I answered him the same way I might have answered someone in an office, or on a call, or across a reception desk. Calm, precise, no extra language. "Yes," I said, "I need to stop service on this order." He blinked once, not out of disbelief, more to shift from assumption into procedure. "Are you the account holder?" "I am." I turned the invoice toward him and pointed to the name, then opened the confirmation email on my phone and matched the order number. He took a step closer, checked both, and gave a small nod. "Do you want to cancel the meal entirely?" he asked, "or delay service?" "Cancel it," I said. He hesitated, but only because he was being careful. "I'll need the office to note it." "That's fine." I called the number myself. The woman who answered sounded like she was standing in a quiet room, maybe at a service desk. I gave her my name, the event address, the order number, and the request. She put me on a brief hold, then came back and asked for the last 4 digits of the card on file. I gave them to her. She confirmed the account. She asked whether there had been a service issue. I told her no. I was simply canceling before meal service began. That was the whole call. No one asked whether my father approved. No one asked who had invited whom. The system only wanted to know one thing: who had authority over the order. When I ended the call, the kitchen felt even quieter than before. The manager let out a slow breath through his nose and gave a professional little nod. "All right," he said. "We'll begin packing the hot items back up." One of the servers looked over from the island. Another paused with a stack of plates in her hand. No one seemed offended. They just shifted direction. Sterno cans were capped. Serving spoons were lifted away. The lids went back on the trays one by one. Soft metal sounds against metal frames. I stood there for a moment and watched them work. That was when I understood something I should probably have understood years earlier. A family can get used to your effort so completely that they stop seeing it as effort at all. It becomes background, infrastructure, like electricity or clean towels, or a gate that happens to be unlocked before everyone arrives. People only notice systems when they stop working. I put the phone face down for a second, then picked it up again. There was no scene in the kitchen, no shaking hands, no tears. My heartbeat was steady. If anything, I felt unusually focused. I have always done better once things become clear. And clarity, for me, usually comes in steps. Step 1. Stop doing work for people who insist it has no value. Step 2. Make decisions only where the responsibility is actually yours. Step 3. Leave before the argument starts. I picked up my bag and slipped the folder back inside. From the backyard, I could still hear a low conversation and the occasional burst of laughter from someone who had not yet noticed anything had changed. A chair scraped over stone. A child called for another child. Somewhere near the fence, plastic eggs were still being collected from the wet grass. The kitchen staff moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that made the whole thing feel even more final. Fuel pressed down. Handles latched. A rolling cart turned toward the service door. Then I waited. That was the exact point where the afternoon stopped feeling like a family event and started feeling like an account being closed. About 10 minutes later, the first signs of confusion reached the yard. At first, it did not look like a problem. It looked like movement. Staff carrying trays away from the kitchen. A cart rolling toward the side entrance. The catering van backing a little closer to the drive. People kept talking for another minute or two because family gatherings have their own momentum and most people assume someone else knows what is happening. Then they noticed no food was being served. I stepped into the front hallway with my bag over my shoulder just as my father came in through the patio door. He looked past me first, toward the kitchen, as if the answer might still be sitting there in plain view. "What's going on?" he asked. "The food is leaving," I said. He frowned, not angry yet, just trying to place the problem somewhere outside himself. "What do you mean, leaving?" Behind him, I could hear chairs shifting against the patio. Voices had changed tone, less relaxed now, more pointed. Someone asked whether there had been a delivery mistake. A child started crying, probably over something unrelated, but in that moment it blended into the rest of it. My father took another step into the house. Why would the food be leaving? I adjusted the strap on my shoulder and answered him in the same voice I had used with the catering office. "Because I canceled service." He stared at me for a moment. It was not a dramatic pause. It was the pause of someone trying to understand the mechanics of a thing before reacting to it. My stepmother appeared behind him then, one hand still holding a folded napkin. "Canceled," she said. "What are you talking about?" "The order was under my account," I said. So I ended it. My father gave a short laugh, but there was no amusement in it. "You can't just do that." Before I answered, the catering manager stepped into the hallway from the kitchen. He had the invoice clipboard in one hand and the expression of a man who had no interest in becoming part of a family disagreement. "Sir," he said politely, "the account holder requested cancellation before meal service began. We verified the order details with the office." That changed the room. Not because anyone suddenly agreed with me, because the conversation had moved out of opinion and into procedure. There is not much space to argue once a third party calmly explains that policy has already been followed. My father looked at him, then at me again. "That's ridiculous. This is my house." The manager gave a small, respectful nod. "I understand, but the authorization was attached to her account." Authority, in moments like that, does not look impressive. It does not sound powerful. It looks like a name on an invoice, a card on file, and a policy someone is paid to follow. That was all. But it was enough. My stepmother's face changed first, not into shock, into annoyance. The kind that comes when a system fails to bend around what someone assumed they controlled. "You're really doing this now?" she asked me. I looked at her. "I'm acting within what belongs to me." That was the closest I came to saying anything personal. Behind them, my brother had stopped in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room. He was watching in that still way people do when they realize a situation they thought they understood had another layer underneath it. For the first time all day, he looked directly at me and kept looking. Then the manager excused himself and went back toward the staff. That, more than anything, settled it. If he had stayed, my father might have tried to keep pressing the point. But once the neutral party left, there was nothing left to challenge except the truth itself, and the truth was simple. I had paid for the food. I had canceled the food. The company was leaving with it. Outside, the confusion had spread fully now. I could hear separate conversations starting up across the yard. One cousin asking whether pizza should be ordered. Someone else saying they thought lunch was already in the kitchen. My aunt's voice, low and strained, trying to calm the children. The whole gathering had begun to loosen at the center. And that was the part one understood immediately. It was never just about the money. It was about structure, timing, planning, calls made in advance, details handled before anyone else arrived. Families like mine often mistake that work for personality. They call one person so organized, or so helpful, or good at these things, when what they really mean is that one person has been quietly holding the event together. The moment that person steps back, everyone can suddenly see the shape of what they were standing on. My father opened his mouth again, maybe to correct me, maybe to reclaim the room, but nothing came out right away. He was too late for a clean version of the story. Too many people had already noticed the staff packing up. Too many guests were already standing. The unraveling had become public. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. Silence, at that point, was more useful than explanation. So I said only one more thing. I thought I was a guest. No one answered that. My brother lowered his eyes for a second after that, then looked back at me with something quieter than apology and heavier than surprise. He did not speak. Maybe he did not know how. Maybe he was still adding up the day in reverse, realizing who had opened the gate, hidden the eggs, paid the balance, directed the staff, answered every question, and made the whole thing look easy. Sometimes recognition comes late. It still arrives. I gave him a small nod. Nothing more. Then I walked to the front door. Behind me, my stepmother said my name once, not warmly, not sharply either. More like someone trying to pull a conversation back before it leaves the room. I did not turn around. The handle was cool in my hand. Outside, the air had shifted toward evening. The driveway still held a little dampness in the shaded places, and the sky had gone pale at the edges. As I crossed toward my car, I could hear the backyard changing shape behind the house. Not loud, just unsettled. Guests standing, children asking questions, adults moving into that careful tone people use when an event is clearly ending earlier than planned and no one wants to be the first to say so. I put my bag in the passenger seat and sat for a moment before starting the engine. Driving away did not feel like a win. It felt unfamiliar. For years, I had confused usefulness with belonging. I thought if I handled enough, remembered enough, covered enough, there would always be a place set for me that meant something. But a person can be central to the work and still be treated as optional in the family. Those are not the same thing. I understood that more clearly with every mile. About half an hour later, at a red light off the highway, my phone buzzed against the console. It was a message from my brother. I didn't know you were paying for all of it. I read it once. Then I put the phone face down. And I waited. I did not answer my brother that night. By the time I stopped for coffee, the sky had gone fully dark and the day had flattened into that strange quiet that follows a public mistake. I found a diner just off the highway, the kind with bright overhead lights, laminated menus, and booths that made a soft sticking sound when you shifted against the vinyl. I ordered coffee and a slice of pie I barely touched. My phone stayed face down beside the sugar dispenser. When you spend enough years being useful, the hardest part is not leaving once. It is staying gone after people remember what you were carrying. The first call came the next morning from my Aunt Rachel. She did not mention my father's words right away. She started with logistics, which told me more than anything else could have. There had not been enough food in the house. Someone had sent one of the cousins out for sandwiches. The children had been cranky by 5. My father was embarrassed. My stepmother was upset about how things looked. That was the phrase she used. How things looked. I listened without interrupting. Then she said, more quietly, I don't think everyone realized how much you were handling. I think they do now, I said. She was silent for a second. Then she asked if I would come by next weekend so we could all talk calmly. That word, calmly, almost made me smile. I'm not coming by, I said, but I am willing to send over a list. A list of what? Everything I've been covering. She let out a small breath. Dana, I'm serious. And I was. By the time I got home that afternoon, I already knew I was not going to handle this through feelings. Feelings were too easy for other people to reinterpret. I was difficult. I was sensitive. I was making a holiday into something bigger than it needed to be. I had heard versions of that language for years. Paperwork, on the other hand, was less flexible. So I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and the accordion folder I kept in the hall cabinet. It held receipts, confirmations, delivery notices, screenshots, reimbursement requests that had never been answered. and holiday notes going back almost 3 years. I had not collected them to build a case. I had collected them because I am the kind of person who likes records. But once I spread everything out under the dining light, the pattern was too plain to miss. Egg hunt supplies, table rentals, specialty cakes, grocery runs, 2 floral deposits, 1 plumber during a 4th of July weekend when guests were already arriving, fall porch decorations my stepmother had texted me about as though assigning an errand, catering balances, bakery pickups, last-minute chair rentals, cash tips for servers. 3 years of small, useful, forgettable things that only become visible when you line them up. I made coffee, sat back down, and began to sort. Step 1. Separate what I had paid for. Step 2. Separate what I had organized but not funded. Step 3. Mark what had been requested by text, what had been assumed, and what had never been acknowledged at all. The work took hours, but it did not feel hard. It felt familiar. Calm comes easier to me when there are columns involved. By early evening, I had a clean spreadsheet with dates, occasions, vendors, amounts, and notes. Nothing emotional, just facts. I attached copies of the larger invoices in a single folder. Then I wrote a short email. I sent it to my father, my stepmother, and my brother. The subject line was simple: holiday and event costs. Summary: the body was even simpler. I wrote that after Easter, I had reviewed my records and realized I would no longer be taking responsibility for planning, financing, coordinating, or managing family events at my father's house. I noted that, for clarity, I had attached a summary of what I had covered over the past several years. I also wrote that no reimbursement was required. This was not a collection notice. It was a boundary and a record. At the end, I added one sentence: going forward, please make other arrangements. Then I attached the files and sent it. I did not reread it 3 times. I did not soften it. I did not explain my feelings. There are moments when a clean sentence is kinder than a long one. My brother replied first, about 20 minutes later. I didn't know any of this. I should have. That was all. My father did not respond that night. My stepmother did, just before 10. Her message was longer and polished in a way that told me she had revised it before sending. She said the spreadsheet felt cold. She said families should not reduce shared traditions to invoices. She said my father had only meant that I had become too controlling about the flow of the day. She said everyone had been under stress. I read it once, then closed the email. Nothing in her message disputed a single number. That mattered. The next morning, my father finally wrote back. His email was brief enough to sound composed and sharp enough to miss the point entirely. He said I was being disrespectful by copying other people on a private family matter. He said if I had felt unappreciated, I could have spoken to him directly instead of embarrassing everyone. I noticed what was missing before I noticed anything else. No denial, no correction, no objection to the spreadsheet itself, just objection to being seen. I printed both emails and added them to the folder. Then I waited. 3 days later, my brother called. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered and carried the phone with me to the laundry room, where I was folding towels fresh from the dryer. Warm cotton, clean detergent, the small steadiness of ordinary things. I needed that while I listened. He did not waste much time. Dad wants to meet, he said. I folded one towel in half, then again. About what? He says this has gone too far. I gave a quiet breath that was not quite a laugh. That depends on what he means by far. There was a pause on his end. Then he said, more honestly, he didn't know you were paying for that much. I didn't either. I set the towel on top of the others. You knew I was doing the work. I knew you handled things, he said. I didn't know you were covering the bills. That was probably true, or true enough. He told me my father wanted to sit down Sunday afternoon at a restaurant near his office. Neutral ground, he said, as though he were offering something generous. My stepmother would be there too. He asked whether I would come if he came as well. I thought about it for a moment. A controlled setting, public enough to keep voices down, private enough to finish a conversation. Yes, I said. I'll come. When I arrived Sunday, they were already seated. It was a quiet restaurant in a business hotel, the kind with low lighting even in daylight, cloth napkins, water glasses already filled, and a pianist somewhere in the background playing so softly that the music barely held a shape. My father sat facing the room. My stepmother sat beside him with her purse placed carefully near her chair leg. My brother was across from them, one hand around a glass of water he did not seem to be drinking. I took the remaining seat, set my bag beside me, and said hello. No one smiled much. A server came by, asked whether anyone wanted coffee, and left again after we ordered. We waited until he was out of earshot. My father folded his hands on the table and looked at me with the expression he used when he wanted to sound reasonable before saying something firm. I think this has become larger than it needed to be, he said. I opened my menu, closed it, and set it down. I don't think it became large until it became visible. His jaw shifted slightly. My stepmother leaned back and looked toward the tablecloth for a second, then at me. Dana, she said, no one is denying that you've been helpful. Helpful. That word did not bother me anymore, because by then I understood exactly what it was doing. Making labor sound optional. Making years of planning sound like a personality trait. Softening dependence into preference. I didn't send the records so you could call me helpful, I said. I sent them so everyone would understand what I won't be doing anymore. My father's tone tightened. You embarrassed us. I met his eyes. You addressed me across a table full of guests and told me I was just a guest in the family. I responded by ending an account in my name. Those were the facts. My brother looked down at the table then, not because he disagreed, I think, but because there was nothing comfortable left to look at. My father shifted in his chair. That comment was about attitude. You were acting like you were running the event. I was running the event. The sentence sat between us without strain. Not loud, not sharp, just accurate. The coffee arrived then, 4 cups placed down one at a time. Cream in a small pitcher, sugar in a bowl. The interruption helped. It gave everyone a moment to rearrange themselves. I added a little cream to mine and waited until the server left. Then I opened my bag and took out a thin folder. I had printed only what mattered most. The Easter catering invoice with my name on it. 2 vendor confirmations from Thanksgiving and Christmas. A reimbursement text from 18 months earlier that had never been answered. A short summary page showing totals by year. Nothing excessive, just enough to define reality. I set the folder on the table and slid it toward the middle. This is why I'm not debating intentions, I said. I'm looking at records. My stepmother did not touch the folder. My father did. He opened it, glanced at the first page, then the second, then the summary sheet. He did not linger because lingering would have looked too much like reading. But he saw enough. My brother reached over after a moment and looked more carefully. His mouth tightened in a way that told me he was doing math in his head. My father closed the folder again. This still could have been handled privately, he said. It was, I said, until Easter. That was the first point where no one answered me at all. Silence does a different kind of work in a room once everyone understands the facts. Earlier in my life, I would have filled that silence to make things easier for everyone else. I would have explained more, softened more, offered a bridge back to comfort before anyone had crossed into honesty. I did not do that this time. I let the quiet stay. My stepmother was the one who spoke next, and when she did, emotion had finally entered her voice. Not grief. Irritation edged with disbelief. So what is it you want exactly, she asked. An apology? Reimbursement? Some formal recognition for hosting children's holidays? I looked at her. No, I said. I want the arrangement to end. She frowned. What arrangement? The one where I do the planning, pay the extras, solve the gaps, and then get spoken to like I'm in the way. Again, no one corrected the description. My father leaned back, folded his arms, and stared past me for a moment toward the dining room windows. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. You've always been very good at taking charge. That was as close as he was going to get to admitting dependence. I nodded once. And you've always been comfortable letting me. My brother exhaled through his nose and rubbed a hand over his face. Then, without looking at either of our parents, he said, she's not wrong. That changed the room more than anything else had. Not because it was dramatic, because it came from someone who usually avoided choosing sides. My father turned toward him immediately. My stepmother stiffened. My brother kept his gaze on the table for another second, then looked up. She shouldn't have had to send a spreadsheet for us to notice, he said. The pianist in the background moved into another song. A glass clinked somewhere near the bar. Outside the tall windows, people crossed the parking lot with overnight bags and paper cups, living ordinary afternoons that had nothing to do with ours. I took a sip of coffee. It had already cooled slightly. Then I said the only thing left that needed saying. I won't be handling holidays anymore. Not Easter. Not Thanksgiving. Not Christmas. Not vendor calls. Not setup. Not payments. If you want to host, host. If you want help, ask someone else. I'm not angry. I'm finished. My father looked at me for a long moment after that. He did not apologize. My stepmother did not apologize either. But something quieter happened, and in some families, that is the closest thing to truth you get. They stopped arguing with the facts. They stopped calling me dramatic. They stopped pretending the system had run on goodwill alone. And once that happened, the conversation was over whether they liked it or not. I put the folder back in my bag. Then I waited. After that lunch, things settled faster than I expected. Not emotionally, structurally. That is usually how truth works when it finally gets enough light on it. People may still resent it. They may still rewrite it privately in their own minds. But once the numbers, timelines, and third-party details are in the room, the old version becomes harder to perform. I did not hear from my father for 9 days. That, by itself, was unusual. He was not a man who enjoyed leaving a matter unresolved, especially if he believed silence might be mistaken for concession. But this time silence served him better than argument. There was no clean defense available. He had said what he said in front of witnesses. The catering company had confirmed the account details. The records I sent matched dates everyone recognized. Even my brother, who had spent years moving around tension rather than through it, had stopped pretending the situation was vague. On the 10th day, an email arrived. It was short, 4 sentences. My father wrote that going forward, family gatherings at his house would be organized within the household. He said he appreciated past contributions. He added that it would be best for everyone if roles were clearer in the future. There was no apology in it. No direct acknowledgement of Easter. No mention of the public comment that caused the whole thing. But again, what mattered was not what he said. It was what he accepted. He accepted that I would no longer do the work. He accepted that someone else would now have to handle the planning. He accepted, whether he liked it or not, that the arrangement had ended. I printed the email and added it to the folder. My stepmother did not write at all. Instead, about a week later, she sent a short text asking if I happened to have the contact information for the rental company that supplied extra chairs for Thanksgiving. I read it while standing in line at the pharmacy. Then I typed back, "I'm sure the information is in your previous messages." That was all. It may sound small, but it was not small to me. In the past, I would have found the number, checked whether the company still served their area, maybe even warned her that bookings filled early in November. I would have smoothed the path without being asked properly and without expecting credit for it. That was the old reflex. Quiet, efficient, automatic. This time, I left the work where it belonged. My brother called a few days after that. He sounded tired in a way I recognized. Not from work. From having finally noticed something he should have noticed earlier. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me. I was at home, wiping down the kitchen counters after dinner. The window over the sink was open a few inches, and I could hear someone mowing 2 houses over. It was one of those ordinary evenings that makes difficult conversations easier to hold. "About which part?" I asked. "The part where you said being useful wasn't the same as being family." I rested my hand on the edge of the counter for a moment and looked out the window. "That wasn't really the point," I said. "What was the point then?" "The point was that I kept agreeing to a role no one had named honestly." He was quiet. Then he said, "I should have paid attention sooner." "Yes," I said. I did not make it easier for him than that. To his credit, he did not ask me to. He just stayed on the line for a second and then said he was taking over the summer barbecue planning this year. He said it as if reporting a fact, not asking permission. "That seems fair," I said. He laughed once, softly. "I've already made a spreadsheet." That surprised me enough that I smiled. "Good," I said. "Then you'll be fine." There was one more piece of confirmation, and it came from outside the family. About 3 weeks after Easter, the catering office emailed me a final event summary and the adjusted refund notice for the canceled service. The refund was partial, as expected. Labor prep and some materials had already been committed, but the unused portion had been credited back to my card. The document included the order number, the cancellation timestamp, and the note that the request had been made by the verified account holder before buffet service began. I saved the PDF in the folder on my laptop and did nothing else with it. I did not forward it. I did not mention it. I did not need to. By then, the truth no longer required support. It had already settled into the structure of things. Summer came, and with it the first family event I did not organize. I was invited to the barbecue, though the invitation came through a group text instead of directly from my father. The menu was vague. The time changed twice. Someone forgot drinks. Someone else forgot ice. My brother had clearly tried, but halfway through the afternoon, there were no serving utensils for the fruit tray. The folding tables were uneven on the patio stones, and the children had to wait too long to eat. No one said anything to me about it. That part mattered too. No one handed me a bag of supplies and asked me to fix it. No one leaned over and said, "You're so much better at this." No one quietly slid responsibility in my direction and assumed I would catch it before it hit the ground. I brought one bowl of pasta salad I had offered to make. I set it down. I visited with my nieces. I stayed for 2 hours. Then I left. Being ordinary in my own family felt unfamiliar at first. Then it felt restful. By then, I had started noticing how much space opened up in my life once I was no longer spending whole weeks managing other people's gatherings. Saturdays stayed intact. Holiday mornings felt slower. My checking account stopped absorbing expenses I never fully named. Even my mind felt less crowded. I was no longer carrying 7 invisible tabs open in the background at all times. And once that happened, something else became clear. The real consequence was never that Easter dinner left in a van. The real consequence was that everyone had to see, maybe for the first time, how much of what they called tradition had actually been labor. Planned labor, funded labor, quiet labor, mine. After that, the family story changed, even if no one announced it had. I was no longer so good at these things. I was no longer helping out. I was no longer the person who would naturally take care of it. I had a different role now. I was simply a person at the table. And if that sounds small, it wasn't. It was freedom. A few weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, I was at home with the windows open and a dish towel over my shoulder, wiping down the kitchen counters after making tea. The light in my apartment had that late-day softness that makes everything look a little more settled. There was a clean stack of mail by the fruit bowl, a load of laundry turning slowly in the dryer, my phone charging on the far end of the counter, quiet for once. Nothing urgent, nothing pending, no confirmation numbers to check, no vendor to call back, no list running in the back of my mind. I poured tea into a mug, carried it to the table, and sat down without thinking about who else needed something from me. That was still new. For a long time, I had confused peace with preparation. I thought calm came from staying ahead of other people's needs, catching every gap before it widened, making everything smooth enough that no one noticed the effort underneath. But real peace, I learned, is different. It is not being needed at every moment. It is being able to sit still in your own home and know that what belongs to someone else will remain someone else's. My father and I still speak now. Not every week, not with the old rhythm, but we speak. The relationship is narrower, maybe more honest. My stepmother is polite when I see her. My brother has become better at noticing who is carrying what, and I respect him for that. Change did not arrive all at once, and it did not make anyone into a different person overnight. It simply redrew the lines. That was enough. The strangest part, in the end, was how normal life felt once I stopped volunteering for a role I never truly agreed to. Holidays became invitations instead of assignments. Family messages became information instead of instructions. I started spending that saved time on my own routines. Long walks, my own small dinners with friends, quiet Saturdays where nothing was being built, fixed, funded, or rescued. One evening, not long ago, my cousin Melissa called while I was folding towels. She asked, carefully at first, whether I had a minute. Then she told me she had been covering far more than anyone realized for her husband's side of the family. Birthday cakes, school gifts, holiday contributions, last-minute cash for things no one ever remembered to mention until the day of. She laughed once while she was explaining it, but it was the tired kind of laugh. I listened. Then I said, "Start writing it down." She got quiet after that, not upset, just thoughtful. Sometimes people do not need a dramatic speech or a perfect plan. Sometimes they only need someone to name the pattern clearly enough that they can finally see it for themselves. I still think about that Easter sometimes. The wet grass, the pastel tablecloths, the sound of chairs shifting when people realized lunch was not coming. For years, I would have remembered a day like that as a rupture. Now I remember it as a correction. Not loud, not cruel, just overdue. I finished my tea, rinsed the mug, and set it upside down on the drying rack. Then I folded the dish towel and hung it back over the oven handle. The apartment was quiet. Evening was coming in slowly through the window over the sink. For the first time in a long while, My life felt like it belonged fully to me, not because anyone had handed it back, but because I had finally stopped handing pieces of it away. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. And if any part of it felt familiar, you are probably not the only one carrying more than people see. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy calm, true to life stories like this one. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always like seeing where people are listening from. And when this one ends, two popular stories will appear next, so you can keep listening if you'd like.